They left us in the middle of the desert, me and my daughter, with no water, no signal, and no goodbye. All because of a stupid argument. One moment we were family, the next, we were forgotten. I held my child close, not knowing if we'd survive or if they ever planned to come back. Before we delve into the story, tell us if you've ever been left behind. Tell us your story in the comment section. Kindly support us with a like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. Now let's go. It was supposed to be a weekend trip to reconnect as a family. That's what my mother said when she invited us. Just some fresh air, a little peace, and no drama, she promised. I believed her. I even canceled plans and packed everything for my daughter. Extra clothes, snacks, her favorite water bottle. We drove out early, a long caravan of cousins, uncles, and siblings, heading toward the red sands of the Mojave. I thought it might be good for all of us. I thought maybe this time, they actually meant to make peace. But I was wrong. So terribly wrong. The tension started before we even arrived. My brother, always itching for a fight, made a cruel comment about my daughter's father, my ex. I told him to stop. My voice cracked a little, not from fear, but from exhaustion. My daughter was right there, quietly coloring in her book. But he kept pushing, and I pushed back. We argued. Nothing physical, nothing wild, just words. Angry ones, yes, but nothing worth destroying a family over. I thought it was over when the conversation died down and we continued driving. What I didn't know was that the real punishment had already been decided. We stopped at a scenic overlook just before dusk. It was beautiful, miles of golden sand, the sun hanging low like a silent judge. My mom asked me to take a walk with my daughter, go breathe some fresh air, she said. So we did. We walked a few minutes away from the cars, just far enough to enjoy the stillness. But when we turned back, something was wrong. The cars were gone. At first, I laughed. I thought it was a joke. I checked my phone. No service. I walked back to where they had parked. Nothing. Just tire tracks in the dust and a half-empty juice box someone had tossed. That's when my stomach dropped. This wasn't a prank. This was deliberate. My daughter tugged on my sleeve. "Mommy, where did everybody go?" Her voice was small, hopeful, like maybe it was hide and seek. I swallowed hard and told her it was okay, that maybe they went to get gas or water. But deep down, I knew. They left us. Not because we were lost, but because they wanted us lost. And I had no idea how long we had until the sun disappeared and the desert turned cold. The wind picked up not long after sunset, sweeping the sand into low, whispering spirals that danced around our feet like warnings. My daughter clung to my side, her little hand wrapped so tightly in mine it hurt, but I didn't let go. I couldn't. My mind raced for logic, for any reason they would do this. Maybe the cars broke down. Maybe they didn't realize we hadn't returned. But that made no sense. My phone, tucked in my back pocket, showed no bars. No signal. No map. Just a fading battery and a sinking heart. I waved it in the air, climbed a nearby rock, even tried restarting it, like that would change anything. Nothing. Just a black mirror to reflect how abandoned we really were. The temperature dropped fast. The desert wasn't like the city. It didn't ease you into the cold. It just slammed you with it. My daughter started shivering, and I wrapped my hoodie around her. Her lips quivered, and she asked again, "Why did they leave?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how. How do you explain to a child that the people who were supposed to love you chose to leave you behind like trash? That is a stupid argument. Words said in frustration could cost you your safety, your trust, your belief in family. I didn't have the strength to say it out loud. Instead, I held her tighter and kept her walking, praying we'd find a road, a light, something. We followed the trail of tire marks, but they soon vanished in the shifting sand. My legs ached, and my daughter was too tired to walk any farther, so I carried her. Step by step, my body screaming, my throat dry, I kept moving. The moonlight cast long, sharp shadows on the ground, turning the desert into a jagged, unfamiliar world. Every sound made me flinch, coyotes howling in the distance, dry brush crackling under unseen feet. I started to wonder if this was how it ended. Not with a dramatic goodbye or a storm, but with silence, sand, and betrayal disguised as family. My mind bounced between rage and fear. What kind of mother would leave her own child stranded? What kind of brother would drive off knowing we weren't in the car? And worst of all, what kind of daughter had I been, that they found it so easy to erase me? After what felt like hours, we found a small incline, just high enough to scan the horizon. And there it was, a distant flicker. Faint. Uncertain. Maybe a house. Maybe a car. Maybe a hallucination. But it was hope. I whispered into my daughter's ear, "We're not done yet." And I started walking again. The weight of her in my arms nothing compared to the weight I carried in my chest. I didn't know what we'd find at that light. But I knew one thing for sure. If we survived this, my family would never see me beg again. My arms were numb by the time we reached the base of the hill where the faint light shimmered like a dying star. My daughter had drifted in and out of shallow sleep, her small head against my shoulder, her breath uneven but warm. Thank God. Each step I took felt heavier, like my bones were soaked in lead. My throat burned from thirst, and every breath of desert air scratched my lungs raw. But I kept moving, one foot, then the other. I whispered things to myself I didn't even remember later. Maybe prayers, maybe curses, maybe both. All I knew was that if I stopped, we wouldn't make it. The light grew clearer, and eventually, I realized it was real. Not a fire, not a hallucination. It was a porch lamp, dim, yellow, probably solar-powered, flickering with the exhaustion of age. A small trailer sat beneath it, half swallowed by desert scrub. I didn't care if it belonged to a hermit, a criminal, or some recluse with a shotgun and a bad temper. I'd take the risk. Anything was better than dying out there unseen. I reached the door and knocked. Nothing. I knocked again, harder this time, balancing my daughter with one arm and banging with the other. Still nothing. Then, just as I turned to check the window, the door creaked open. A woman stood there. Gray hair tied in a messy bun, face weathered by time and wind, a flashlight in one hand and a pistol in the other. She didn't say anything at first, just looked us up and down. And I knew what she saw. Two strangers, half dead, covered in sand, eyes wild from the edge of survival. "Help us," I said. "Please." My voice cracked as the words left me. Her expression softened just enough. She lowered the pistol and opened the door wider. "Get inside," she said. The inside of the trailer was tiny but warm. She gave us water first, then blankets, then silence. I sat there, rocking my daughter, who had finally fallen into a deep sleep. The woman, her name was Martha, didn't ask questions right away. Maybe she didn't need to. Maybe she'd seen enough lost souls in her time to know that some stories speak louder in the quiet. When she finally asked what happened, I told her everything. Every word. Every moment. I didn't leave anything out. The fight. The way they drove off. The way they didn't come back. I waited for her to call me crazy. I waited for her to suggest maybe it was a misunderstanding. But she didn't. Instead, she said, "You survived people who were supposed to love you." That's the worst kind of survival. I sat in silence after that, her words ringing in my ears. She was right. It wasn't the desert that had broken me. It was the betrayal. The way they smiled at me that morning, pretending everything was fine. The way my mother hugged me like she meant it, knowing damn well they planned to leave us behind. Who does that to their own blood? Who leaves a child in the wilderness over an argument? It wasn't just cruel. It was calculated. And now, as I sat there in a stranger's trailer, wrapped in borrowed blankets, I knew something inside me had changed. I wasn't going back, not to that family, not to that history. I was done giving second chances to people who treated me like an afterthought. But more than that, I was done staying quiet. What they did wasn't just immoral, it was criminal. And they would learn, soon enough, that I wasn't just a mother trying to survive. I was a mother preparing for war. Martha let us stay the night, and I barely remember falling asleep. My body had shut down from exhaustion, my arms still locked in a protective curl around my daughter. When I woke up, it was nearly noon. Sunlight leaked through the trailer blinds, casting sharp beams across the floor. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then the memories rushed back like a flood, my family's faces, the desert, the cold, the endless walk toward nothing. I sat up slowly, my joints aching, my throat dry despite the water Martha had given me. My daughter was still asleep, curled into a ball beside me. Her cheeks were flushed, her lips dry. I touched her forehead, warm, but not burning. That was enough for now. Martha was already outside when I stepped out. She was hanging laundry on a thin rope that stretched between two poles planted deep into the ground. She looked at me without judgment, just quiet acknowledgement. "There's a landline in the cabinet," she said. "Don't use your name. Whoever did that to you might not want you found." The thought struck hard, harder than I expected. I had been so focused on survival that I hadn't even processed the why. Why would they do this? To scare me? To punish me? Or worse, to erase me? What if they'd gone home, told people we'd just disappeared, vanished during a walk? Maybe they figured the desert would handle the rest, and no one would ask questions. I picked up the landline and stared at the keypad. I didn't want to call the police, not yet. I wasn't ready to explain to some officer how my own family had dumped me in the wilderness like trash. I needed control, so I called one person I knew I could trust. Leah, my old roommate from college. We hadn't spoken in a while, but she picked up after 2 rings. "Where the hell have you been?" she asked, her voice frantic. "Your phone's off, your socials are dead, and your brother posted some weird stuff online like you were going through something." I felt the blood drain from my face. "They're lying," I whispered. "They left us. In the desert. Me and my daughter." There was a long silence on the line, then the sharp inhale of disbelief. "Where are you now?" Leah asked. I gave her a rough location, using the landmarks Martha provided. "I'll come get you," she said, no hesitation. "And bring receipts. Everything. You're not letting them rewrite this story." When I hung up, I felt a shift deep in my chest, like something had cracked open. All this time, I'd carried the pain like a private burden. But now, it was turning into something else. Not just pain, not just betrayal. It was fuel, because they didn't just try to hurt me. They tried to silence me. And now, they were out there, crafting a narrative, gaslighting my absence, framing me as unstable while hoping the world wouldn't look too closely. They were wrong. I asked Martha for paper and a pen. I began writing everything down, minute by minute, memory by memory. What time we arrived, who said what they packed, what they told the kids. Every detail, every sneer, every smile that now felt rehearsed. I documented it all, like I was preparing for trial. Because in my mind I was. This wasn't just abandonment. This was calculated emotional and physical endangerment. And they were going to face the consequences, not with tears or screaming matches, but with facts, with truth, and with legal fire they wouldn't see coming. That night, I sat outside the trailer beneath the stars, holding my daughter close as she slept in my lap. The desert, once terrifying and wide, now felt like a witness. It had seen what they'd done. It had held our fear and carried our footprints. And now, it would carry our story. Not just a story of survival, but of return and reckoning. Leah arrived 2 days later in a dusty silver SUV, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, sunglasses perched high like armor. The moment she saw me step out of Martha's trailer, she froze. Not because she didn't recognize me, but because of what she did see, bones sharper under my skin, the fatigue in my eyes, and the bruised hollowness of someone who had walked too long carrying too much. She ran to me, arms wide, and for the first time in days, I let someone hold me without flinching. "They're done," she whispered. "They just don't know it yet." She had printed screenshots, dozens of them. Posts from my brother implying I had wandered off. A Facebook comment from my aunt suggesting I was unwell. Photos cropped just right to erase my daughter and me entirely. It was surreal, like watching someone rewrite my life in real time. "They're trying to make it look like you snapped," Leah said. "Like you abandoned your own kid." I felt the bile rise in my throat. My hands clenched before I could stop them. They didn't just leave us in the desert. They were actively burying the truth. They had prepared for this. And that's when the full picture hit me. They hadn't decided to leave us in the moment. They had planned it. That family trip, it wasn't about healing. It was a setup. I told Leah everything. How they asked me to walk with my daughter, how quickly the cars were gone, how I tried to convince myself it was a mistake. But the deeper I spoke, the more I saw it clearly. The way my mother kept checking the time, how my brother packed too much food for just a weekend, how they all seemed detached, like they were waiting for something. And when I brought up the fight again, how petty it was, how small, it clicked. It wasn't about the argument. That was just the excuse they needed. The truth was uglier. I had outgrown their control. I had boundaries now. I said no more often. I was no longer the quiet, apologetic girl they could manipulate. And for that, they decided to make me disappear. Back at the trailer, I gathered the notes I had written. Every detail was dated and time-stamped. With Leah's help, we arranged a meeting with a lawyer who specialized in family abandonment and defamation. She told us something I hadn't considered. What they did could be prosecuted, not just morally condemned, but legally punished. Child endangerment, reckless neglect, emotional abuse, falsifying information publicly. If we played our cards right, they wouldn't just be exposed. They'd face charges. And more importantly, they'd never be able to erase us again. Later that evening, after my daughter had fallen asleep in a real bed at the roadside motel Leah had booked, I stood by the window and looked out at the empty stretch of road. I imagined them back home, laughing, maybe even relaxed, thinking they got away with it. Maybe they were planning what to say next. Maybe they were already gaslighting the rest of the extended family, painting me as unstable, unreliable. But they had underestimated one thing. I wasn't that same girl anymore. The desert stripped that part of me away. What they left behind wasn't broken. It was focused. And the next time they heard from me, it wouldn't be a phone call. It would be a court summons. The letter went out on a Monday. Certified mail. One addressed to my mother. One to my brother. One to my aunt. One to my sister-in-law, who smiled in my face that morning and said family first, while knowing damn well they had left us for dead. Each envelope contained a copy of the legal complaint filed under the Family Abandonment and Child Endangerment Statute. Alongside it were printed screenshots, maps of our last known GPS signal, voice messages they left days after our disappearance. Foolishly thinking their fake concern would absolve them later. I didn't send the letters in anger. I sent them in clarity. I no longer needed to prove what they did. I was simply making it official. The world would now hold them accountable. What followed wasn't immediate chaos. It was worse, silence. The kind of silence that feels too calculated, too careful. They didn't post about me. They didn't respond to my messages. They didn't show up to confront me. But I knew they were scrambling. Their lawyer, some local guy from their side of town, called my attorney 3 days later, trying to negotiate. "This is a family misunderstanding," he said. "You're blowing this out of proportion." My attorney responded the way I would have, had I not been taught to stay calm. "So, is it a misunderstanding, or did they leave a mother and child in the desert and then go home without reporting it?" He didn't have an answer. The court date was set 6 weeks later. I spent every day leading up to it preparing, not just with legal paperwork, but mentally, emotionally. I'd never had my power stripped away so violently, and now, standing in front of that courtroom, I intended to take it back in full view. Leah stood with me every step. She helped me document my recovery. She filmed quiet testimonials. She archived everything. The walk through the desert, the torn backpack my daughter had clung to, the sunburn on my arms that hadn't yet faded. It wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. It was about truth. About forcing those who hurt you to face what they did without the cushion of family titles or holiday traditions. The day of the hearing, I walked in with my daughter's hand in mine. She wore her favorite yellow dress, the one we almost lost in the desert. I wore a black suit and no expression. When my family entered, they looked smaller than I remembered. My mother kept her eyes low. My brother wore a fake cast on his hand, as if that would somehow soften the judge's view. My aunt clutched a handkerchief she hadn't used. None of them looked at me directly. None of them had the courage. But I stared at each of them, unflinching. They thought they could abandon me and still claim the right to my silence. They were wrong. I testified clearly. No tears. No dramatics. Just truth. I told the judge what happened that day, the sequence, the details, the disappearance, the distance. I showed the terrain on a printed satellite map. I explained how far we walked. I showed photos of the shelter Martha had given us. I told them about the lies they spread online. The judge listened without interruption. My daughter even spoke, nervously but bravely, about how everyone left and how mommy carried me when my legs got tired. That testimony hit harder than anything I said. It wasn't just neglect. It wasn't just cruelty. It was a calculated act that nearly cost us our lives. When it was their turn, my mother tried to cry, but the tears never came. "We didn't mean to leave her behind," she said. "We thought she was in the other car." The judge asked, "And what about the 2 days afterward when you didn't file a report?" My brother mumbled something about miscommunication. My aunt claimed she thought I needed space. But the evidence was there, clear, undeniable. Not just what they did, but how they tried to erase it. The court didn't need more than 3 days to deliver the ruling. They were found liable for endangerment and slander. The restraining order was granted. Public apologies were ordered. Fines were issued. But more than that, their credibility was shattered. The same people who painted themselves as saints on Facebook were now being reported on by local news for abandonment. The whispers began. Their neighbors talked. Their coworkers stared. The community they pretended to represent now saw who they truly were. And I didn't say a word. I didn't gloat. I didn't post anything. I let the silence echo back what they once gave me. And in that silence, I healed. Not all at once. Not entirely. But enough. Enough to know I would never let them back in. Enough to know that the woman who walked out of that desert was not the same one who walked in. Life after betrayal isn't a fairy tale. There's no magical sunrise that erases everything. But there is peace, the kind you earn after walking through fire and refusing to come out bitter. My daughter and I moved far away after the court ruling. New city, new school, new mornings filled with routines we shaped ourselves. She stopped asking about grandma. She stopped wondering why her uncles never called. And slowly, I stopped asking too. Not because I forgot, but because I finally understood. Not everyone who shares your blood shares your heart. I still get looks when the story surfaces, whispers from those who don't understand how a family can turn on one of its own. But those who've been through it, they know. They see me and nod silently, the way survivors do. Martha still calls once a month. We send her postcards, little thank yous etched in crayon and gratitude. She was the stranger who became a lifeline. Proof that sometimes, the people who save you are the ones who have no reason to. Some nights, I still think about that moment in the desert. The silence. The cold. The flicker of light that appeared just when I thought all hope was gone. That's what I hold on to. Not the pain. Not the abandonment. But the proof that even when others try to erase you, the world still has ways to write you back in. Stronger. Louder. And completely in control. I didn't just survive what they did. I outlived it. If this story moved you or reminded you of how powerful quiet resilience can be, subscribe for more real-life inspired narratives. Here, we don't just tell stories. We shine light on what others try to bury. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. There's always strength waiting on the other side of silence.